I'm Tom Rawlings with Homegrown Leadership. Today I want to talk about an often misunderstood concept of leadership. That concept is empowerment and empowering others. Why should we empower others? How do we empower others? Well, to start with, I'd like to start with an illustration about empowerment from the Old Testament. This is an illustration that's often used to illustrate delegation, but I believe it also illustrates empowerment very well. Most of you are probably familiar with this story already, so I'll try to keep it brief as I go back through it. But it seems that Moses had led Israel out of Egypt after years of slavery. They were now in the desert. They were wandering, waiting for God to allow them to enter the land that he had promised them earlier. And one day, Jethro, who was Moses' father-in-law, came to visit Moses just to kind of hang out and see what life in the desert was about and get caught up on Moses' family and to see his daughter. And they hung out that evening and they chatted for a while, got caught up. And early the next morning, Jethro got up, and as he's sitting in the tent having his cup of coffee, he was looking around for Moses, and he happened to see Moses heading off through the camp. So Jethro goes out and follows him just to kind of get a glimpse into Moses' life and see how he spends his days there in the desert. And he follows Moses to kind of a central point in the camp, and Moses reaches behind a tent and he grabs a lawn chair and he sets it up there. And as Jethro is watching this, he realizes that a line has already started to form where Moses has set up his chair, and it's going on through the camp. And he doesn't really understand what this is about, so he watches for a while, gets close up behind a tent, and he listens. And he realizes that this first set of people who have come up are asking Moses to settle a dispute for them. One of the sheep had gotten lost, and this man said it was his, and this man said it was his, and they wanted Moses to settle that argument for them. Moses listens to both sides of the case, he makes a decision, and then the next set of people come up. And as Jethro watched, this continued and continued and continued for hours after hour. And Jethro finally realizes he's going to do this all day. Jethro went back to the tent and waited, and later on that evening, Moses wanders in, and he just looks very tired. And Jethro asks him where he's been, and Moses said, well, obviously with a group of people this size, there are bound to be arguments and disputes, and people just don't get along, and they need somebody to decide who's right and who's wrong and make decisions for them. That's what I do. I make their decisions and help them settle these disputes. And Jethro, I imagine, got a puzzled look on his face, and this part isn't in the scripture, but I'm sure that Jethro said, "Are you crazy? What are you doing?" But Jethro did give some advice that's found in the scripture, and he said, this is too much for you to handle all by yourself. You'll exhaust yourself, you'll wear yourself out. You don't need to make every decision that gets made. Tell you what, Moses, my advice would be to grab a couple of guys who you know have some leadership ability and let them decide some of these smaller cases, some of these little disputes and these little decisions that need to be made. Why don't you let them handle those? Why don't you pull together a group of guys who you know have some better leadership skills? Let them decide some of the bigger cases for you. Let them make some of these judgments and some of these decisions. And then why don't you grab some guys who really have some great leadership skills and let them handle the major decisions for you. Let them do this. And then those cases and those decisions that absolutely require you and your involvement, well, you're still there to make those. We can always bring those to you and let you make the decisions that absolutely require your input. Now, while this story does illustrate delegation, because Moses had to delegate some of this responsibility, it also illustrates empowerment, because what didn't happen was those guys didn't go make decisions, then come back to Moses to make sure those decisions were okay. See, they were empowered to make the decisions that needed to be made. Moses allowed them to make the decisions. Why would he do this? Because Jethro's advice was to grab some guys who are capable of making this level of decision and then let them make it. My first point in empowering others is make sure that the people in leadership positions, in your leadership positions, are people whom you trust to make those decisions in leading that department, that assignment. Make sure that they are capable and that you trust them to make this decision. You trust them to lead, basically. The second point is let them lead. Get out of the way and let them do it if they're capable of doing it. See, what I've seen pastors do a lot is we delegate the responsibility, but we hang on to the authority. So if Moses were doing this, it would be something like, okay guys, I'm going to let you decide some of these smaller decisions and I'm not going to be involved in it. Now, go and listen to the judgment and bring me back your recommendation. And I'll make the final decision, but let me know what you think so I can get your input. And that's what we do a lot of times, but that's not what Moses did. Moses allowed them to decide these lower cases. Otherwise, there was no sense in even having them decide the other cases. All they had was advisors. We don't want advisors. We want to lead other leaders, and leaders lead. So empowering others frees us up to only be involved in those areas where we need to be involved in. Let me use an illustration from my personal life. I was working with a church once and sat in on one of their staff meetings, and this is with their executive staff. These were leaders who led other leaders. They ran the ministry. And during the course of this meeting, the subject of an upcoming church picnic came up. And they put the final touches, the finishing touches on this church picnic, and were kind of gathering their thoughts together. And one of them made the observation, hey, we've got some hot dogs left over from this youth event that we had to cancel last month. Why don't we just use those hot dogs in our upcoming church picnic, and that'll save us the expense of having to buy some extra food. So we can go ahead and use that. And everyone agreed that was a great idea. And then one of them said, this is great. Let's take this to pastor because you know this is going to be his decision as to what we serve or not. And as I sat there listening, I thought, seriously, that hit me as I really thought about the impact of what they were saying. This executive team did not have the authority to decide whether they were going to serve hot dogs at the church picnic or not. This was a decision that the pastor had reserved to make. Now let me ask you, does the pastor need to decide whether we serve hot dogs at a church picnic or not? No. If this executive team can't make the decision whether to serve hot dogs, then they should not be on the executive team, because that's a no-brainer. Serve the hot dogs. Who cares? But this pastor reserved that authority for himself. And the staff had learned, we can't make decisions, we can make recommendations. So empower others. Do like Moses did. Make sure your leaders are in the right position, in the right leadership position where you trust them to make those decisions. Let them lead. Let them make those decisions. Be there to provide coaching, to provide some input and advice, and to make those decisions where it's absolutely necessary for your involvement. Empower them enough to allow them to make a mistake. When they make a mistake, you get with them and coach them after that mistake is made. This is what you should have done, or what we could do differently. What would you have done differently? I'll cover this in an upcoming video. I hope you've enjoyed today's session for Homegrown Leadership. I'm Tom Rawlings. If you like what you hear, subscribe to our channel. We'd love to see you subscribe. We put out content about once a week. We try to get something out weekly. Visit our website at homegrownleadership.com. Tell your friends about us. We hope you enjoy it. For Homegrown Leadership, I'm Tom Rawlings.